Okay, we're in Judges chapter 16. Samson is the topic. A quick historical background. In the Old Testament, I always like to know where we're at in history. So about 1100 BC, okay? So what's happening in the world? Anybody have any ideas in 1100 BC? Sorry? The Jews' sin cycle, yes, but globally, I'm talking globally. So different empires, different places in the world. What's happening in 1100 BC? I always like to put everything in a framework. Okay, so the Minoans and Mycenaeans, those ring a bell? So in the Greek part of the world, the Mycenaeans are falling right now. So that part of the world's kind of going into decay. It's not going to be, it'll be 600 years yet, 700 years before you finally get Socrates and Plato and those types of folks. In Mesopotamia, in Anatolia is just another fancy word for the Turkey area. You got the Assyrian king, Tiglath, I'm going to have a problem with this name, Pileser. He conquers the remnants of the Hittite Empire, and the Assyrian influence is becoming stronger. In Egypt, you have the new kingdoms are waning. Ramses the 11th was the last pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. There's internal divisions and loss of the Nubian control for the third intermediate period. China, what's happening in China right now, is the Shang dynasty ended around this time, maybe about 50 years past Samson. The Shang dynasty crumbles, giving way to the Western Zhou dynasty, which introduces the feudal system and bronze inscriptions in China. And then in Europe, you have the Phoenicians. They found colonies in Spain around 1100 BC. And they have expanding trade networks. So, and it's still another 100 years yet before you have David come on the scene, okay? So we're in the Judges period, about 100 years before David, and we have this last judge, Samson, okay? A little bit of the Wild West. There's not a lot of structure globally, not a lot of big empires raising. It's still, I don't know, 500-600 years before the Roman Empire even starts, the Roman Republic. You know the story, Romulus and Remus around 500 BC. So it's a little hectic. Yeah, it's a little hectic. Okay, so somebody read for me, please, nice and loud, verses 1 through 3. Go ahead.
Now Samson gazed and saw harlot there and went to her. When Gazit were told Samson had come here, they surrounded the place and laid him all night gate of city, where quite all night they, in the morning when it's day, light we will kill him. Continue.
No, that's good. Oh yeah, through verse 3, sorry.
As Samson lay low till midnight, then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gates of the city, the two great posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, carrying him to the top of the hill, facing the harbor.
Opposite of Hebron. Yep, thank you. So you have Samson, he goes into Gaza, and he finds a harlot there, and the Philistines, the story of his life, right? That's part of his role, is to be in opposition to the Philistines. It's part of the reason why God put him in power, so to speak, is to be a buffer, or the terminology I came into thinking about is Samson was a walking threat. Samson was a walking threat to God's enemies. We'll get into that concept in a moment about being a walking threat and what that means. It's actually a very good thing in a way. But you have part of Samson's character.
And you lost the.
Okay, so part of Samson's character, he has some flaws just like everybody does in their life, right? One of his flaws is sexual temptation. Not new to man by any means. So he has this repeated sexual temptation, and he's in the city of Gaza, and they think they're going to get him, and he says, you know what? I think I'm just going to take your gates off their hinges, and I'm going to walk it up a mountain, and I'm going to show you what can happen when you think you have me trapped. It's important because these feats of strength and the fear of the Philistines towards this man Samson on these acts, the Bible's trying to describe how much of a threat he was to the Philistines. Any other thoughts on those verses before we go to verse 4 through 21? Somebody's going to have a little bit of a...
I can see like the harbor, Samson's carrying. If I know gates from the olden times, they were huge.
Comments on the gates, that they were huge, big gates. Yeah, big gates. Yeah, he was, I think we can say, not superhuman strength, but God-given strength that was not common.
I'm thinking, but I think Legend of Hercules. I think they're all they got inspiration by our judge here.
That's interesting. That is interesting. So he mentions Hercules. So you have, that's very interesting because we already said that the historical context was, it's really before Homer. And so if this legend of Samson with this superhuman strength reaches the Greeks here in maybe another 100 or 200 years, that's interesting. I always like to think about how some of the ancient texts intertwine with each other. So that is an interesting thought. Okay, any other thoughts on these first 3 verses before we jump into verse 4 and following? Okay. I need somebody with a loud voice. 4 through 21, please. Unless you want me to read this. Now it happened afterwards that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, and her name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, entice him, and see where his great strength lies, and how we may overpower him. He may bind him to afflict him. Then they were each to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength is, and how you may be bound to afflict you. And Samson says to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh cords that have not been dried, then I will become weak and be like any other man. Okay, so this is kind of interesting because she directly tells him, like, I want to know the source of your strength so I can basically deceive you and overcome you. And so he toys with them. So there's other parts of Samson's story I want you to understand. He's not just a strong, brute man with no intellectual or even a sense of humor. You remember in the past chapters when he has the riddles? You guys remember Samson's riddles? And he has the lion, and then he has the honey, and he goes to the Philistines and he gives them riddles. So he's not just a dumb guy. He kind of likes to, he's actually a quite intelligent person, and he kind of likes to toy with people. Not only intellectually he likes to toy with them, but physically with his strength he likes to toy with people. He's almost...
Questions that Delilah will ask.
Sorry?
This is one of many questions that.
It's one of many questions that Delilah asks, but he almost has this. Samson's probably not known for his humility. I think he's intellectually smart and physically very strong, but he likes to toy with his enemies for sure. Verse 8, then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh cords that had not been dried, and they bound him with it. Now she had men lying in wait, sitting in an inner room, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the cords as a string of tender snaps when it touches fire, so his strength was still not known. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have deceived me, and behold, the lies. Now please tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if they bind me tightly with new ropes, which have never been used for work, then I'll become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. Now the men lying in wait here, sitting in the inner room, but he snapped the ropes from his arms like a thread. Okay. It doesn't appear to me from the text that this happens 3 times, these questions. It doesn't appear to me from the text that the men lying in wait that are going to eventually gouge out his eyes are known to Samson. So Delilah just sounds this alarm, and then he breaks his constraints, but the men are never there. The reason I think that is because those other men never die. So if Samson knew that they were there, I think he probably would have eliminated them. But I think in these sections here, and I don't think this happened within a few hours. I think this is maybe a couple days, and we'll get that, or maybe even weeks that he's with Delilah for a while. I'll continue. Verse 13, then Delilah said to Samson, up to now you have deceived me and told me lies. Tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten in a pin, then I will become weak and be like any other man. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his hair and wove them into a web, and she fastened it with the pin and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the pin of the loom and the web. Okay, so there's just a couple thoughts about modern times. So one is he has it's what seems to be dreadlocks. So when you see people in public that have dreadlocks, it's okay, right? I mean, this is not new. Dreadlocks are not new. This is very, very old. And the Nazirite vow prohibited Samson from cutting his hair. And so you got to do something with it. My great-grandmother, her name was Florence, she never cut her hair. Now, she didn't take a Nazirite vow or anything like that. She was just a Dutch woman that didn't want to cut her hair for whatever reason. And so she never did. And when she passed away, we had her hair in a box, and we kept it. I don't know where it is to this day. Some people may say, hey, that's kind of gross. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it was just what she did. She never cut her hair, so we kept it. And again, I don't know where it's at now. But you got to do something with that hair. Anybody watch anybody know of anybody that never cut their hair in their life?
My nephew did for a while before he did.
Your nephew did for a while before he did.
Yeah, my oldest
But
nephew.
anybody that never cut their hair in their life? Anybody have like an old relative that never cut their hair? Nobody? Okay, so I'm the only weird one in the room. It's okay. Anyways, you got to do something with his hair. You got to keep it under control. So Samson had dreadlocks. He braided it. He kept it under control in some way, right? You can't just let that go wild. Another one that interests me in the Old Testament on common things is nose rings. If you read the Old Testament through Moses when they're wandering through the wilderness, and they get their gold, right? Because Aaron has them make the calf, the golden calf. And where does the gold come from? Their rings, their jewelry, and their nose rings, it says. So just interesting to keep in mind. So while he slept, Delilah took 7 locks of his hair, okay, and she binds it. Verse 15, then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your strength is. Now it happened when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death, and so daily in verse 16. That's why I think in this context, this whole episode of her trying to get the strength of him happened for a while. In modern times, if you even think back to you and your significant other, or even somebody that you dated, how long does it take to really fall in love? Like the heart aching, like ache of love.
Well, it says here, my version says his soul was vexed to death.
Yeah, I think he was in love with Delilah, though. It happens in real life. I don't know. I'm thinking 2-3 months. If you have like daily constant contact with somebody. Okay? So, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months here is these verses cover. That's just my opinion. Then verse 16. Now it happened when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. So he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, a razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like every other man. And Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart. So she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come at once, for he has told me all that's in his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came to her and brought up the silver in their hands. So they pay off Delilah. It seems like before they actually get Samson. But Delilah's not stupid. She's, by this time, if I'm right, I may not be, but if she's known him for 2-3 months and has been around him for a little while, she kind of knows when he's playing with her and knows when he's serious by now. So anyways, she gets paid off before they actually get him. So verse 19, then she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as the other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that Yahweh had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. There's motifs throughout. There's a shadowing and foreshadowing. There's all these interlaid meanings within the scriptures. Here he's blinded, right? And I can't help but make the equivocation or the parallel that his short-sightedness in his moral character, his short-sightedness in his mission, his short-sightedness in his life equates to this blindness. So he's actually spiritually blind in some respects, right? But also physically blind now that he's made some decisions. Anybody else have any thoughts on these verses? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the last part she says, he's just a deep sleeper, how somebody could sleep so deeply. But the other part was, if I reinterpret in my own words, like, Delilah asks him 3 times, doesn't he know what she's up to and what she's going to do? Like, how could he be so dumb, right? And I think it goes back to, I don't know, I can't ask Samson those questions, but I think it goes back to his short-sightedness, his blindness, and his overall purpose and how he's supposed to serve Israel. It seems like he's pretty self-centered, and so he does everything for himself. He doesn't really see himself as the buffer between the Philistines and Israel. And maybe he doesn't care in some respects. He's in love with this girl, and just about everybody that grows up, you fall in love at some point, and you do stupid things when you're in love, right? I don't know, it's just part of life, but yeah, any more comment? Yeah.
But he just lost his patience with her because she just, well, we would say, nagged him to a point to where he just said, okay, I'm just going to tell her. But I don't think, he did not know what she was up to, did he? Did he think that she was up to something?
I think maybe I suspect he did know that she was up to something.
But he didn't know what.
I almost think he did know what. Now, this is my opinion, so you have to be very careful, okay? I think maybe he was weary of carrying the load of leadership for Israel. I don't know if he just didn't care anymore or what, but I think he had some semblance of knowing, but he had gotten away with everything. He was so strong, right? He could do anything he wanted to do. And in the scriptures it says that people are slow to change their behavior because God is, in a sense, slow and graceful in his judgment. And so the very first time, if I remember correctly, you're going to have to correct me, but the first real time he screws up is when he kills the lion, remember? And then he lies about not being clean. Like he didn't tell his parents he wasn't, because he was with a dead animal, remember? He just gets away with things and gets away with things and gets away with things. And I don't know that he saw the consequences of his sin. It's a good question. I wonder it too, and I haven't answered it fully, so I'm sorry. But any other comments, questions?
But he also did not tell her, or he did tell her after she asked him, do you love me? That's a question that a lot of couples ask today. Do you love me? If you love me, you'll do this or you'll do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is her.
He did love her.
He did. I think from the scriptures, I think he really did. But she didn't really love him. All she wanted was the money, which is something you boys got to watch these days. There's a lot of money-hungry ladies out there, and guys for that reason. It's a very deceptive pull. Okay, so 21, they seize him, they gouge out his eyes, verse 22. However, the hair of his head begins to grow again after it's shaved off. So there's a glimmer of hope, a foreshadowing in the story of what is about to happen. Now the lords of the Philistines assemble to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to be glad, and they said, our God has given us Samson, the enemy, into our hands. Then the people saw him and praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. So it just gives you more of an idea that the Philistines really feared this guy. And so it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, "Call for Samson, that he may amuse us." Okay, this brings to remembrance in the book of Acts. You remember with John the Baptist, and you have Herod's daughter-in-law, I believe. She dances, right? They're at a party. They start drinking. He calls out the dancer,
She asked for his head.
right? They ask for some entertainment. So at this time, they're like, "Hey, we want some entertainment. Let's have Samson perform for us." Now, my question is, what did he perform? What did he do? Was it some I don't know. There's a performance. I don't know what he performed. I don't know what it was. I don't know if he danced or did gymnastics, or he's blind, right? So I don't know what he's going to perform, but he did something. I always have a question. You have a lot of questions in life about the Bible and certain things and what happened at certain times, and you just will never know until we get to heaven and we get to ask, right? So in verse 25, it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, "Call for Samson that he may amuse us." So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them. And they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house is established, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on with Samson was amusing them. So you get an idea for the structure.
To me, it sounds like it was kind of like the size of a Parthenon.
Size of a Parthenon. There's upper level seating. It's almost like it's a temple. So they're worshiping there. So it's not purely a theatrical establishment, but it's a temple to Dagon. But it has an upper level, apparently. Verse 28. Samson calls to Yahweh and says, "O Lord Yahweh, please remember me and please strengthen me in this time." Okay, so you got to think at this time, Samson's pretty humble. He spent, I don't know, we're going to try to paint this picture, and we're going to try not to do this falsely at all, but try to paint this picture. So Samson has his eyes gouged out, and maybe for the last few weeks or months, he's blind. He's got just regular strength, and they put him in grinding grain like an animal. So like you would hook up an ox, and you would walk around the stone with the wooden pillars. Anybody ever see the old movie Conan with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Nobody remembers that movie? Okay, all right. So we got some people that remember this movie. And you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's pushing the grinding stone. He's going around, and then the screen comes off and goes back on, and you see his muscles getting bigger, and he's getting stronger. Anyway, that's what this reminds me of. So he's grinding grain, and you get a lot of time, you get a little thought time, right? When you're grinding the grain all day long, you got 8, 10, 12 hours of grinding grain, and you start thinking about life, and you're like, what did I ever do to get here? Kind of reminds you of the prodigal son when he's eating he's feeding the pigs, and he's doing all these menial chores, not really options that you really want to do in life. And you get a lot of thought time and a lot of not necessarily self-help, but a lot of reflection time to think about life choices, as the kids would say these days. So he's grinding grain, and he's really thinking about life, and he's like, you know what, I think I screwed up pretty big. So he gets called, and he's supposed to entertain, and he's like, look, he says his prayer, he says, "Oh Lord Yahweh," he says, "please remember me and please strengthen me just this last time." O God, that I may be at once avenge the Philistines from my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house was established and supported himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bent with his strength so that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he put to death by his death were more than those whom he put to death during his life. Then his brothers and his father's household came down, carried him, brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Ashtol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years.
To me, Samson was the story of a tragic hero.
Yeah, tragic hero. Yeah, it's a good analysis. He has an answered prayer of a life that was. Let's go into the walking threat, and then we'll kind of get into what is sum up his life a little bit. So Samson was a walking threat to the Philistines, and I want to elaborate on this just a little bit because it's important from like an everyday thing that every man in general is a walking threat. And what I mean by that is even Jesus had extreme power, but mitigated it by subjecting his will to God's will. Okay? The verse it says he could have called 10,000 angels and destroyed the world, right? He could have. He could have. But he mitigated his will to the Father's. In many respects, godly men are called to be dangerous men. But that danger and that strength and that potential for danger is mitigated by God's will. Okay? There's many dangerous men in this auditorium and also in these other classes. But they're meek. Meek and lowly, maybe not lowly. Maybe we try to be lowly and humble in heart, yes. But there's many dangerous men in this building, and there should be. But they're not a danger to the people in this room. They're a danger to evil, okay? So if someone were to come in the room, for example, causing threat, they would encounter very dangerous men, okay, that would oppose them. That's a good thing. God put these judges in place at this time to be a buffer between evil and God's people. That's what he wanted Samson to do. That's why he gave him the strength that he had. But he wasn't a threat to God's people. He was a threat to the Philistines. So that's kind of a lesson out of Samson that we should garner, is that a certain amount of danger and a certain amount of walking around threat is a good thing, but it needs to be bridled and subjected to God's will. Okay? That's one thing. The other one is the end of God's, Samson's life. He had an answered prayer. He was able to destroy the temple of Dagon, and that set the stage. It really weakened the Philistines at that time, because they had probably a lot of leadership there at that gathering from the 5 different cities, which, by the way, reminds me of Abraham. Remember when he comes back from the valley of the 5 kings, and there was that battle with the 5 kings? Well, here you have the Philistines that had the 5 cities. You had Gaza, and you had the other cities, and they were all in confederation. Anyways, just tying different things of the Bible together that are interesting. But he has this answered prayer at the end of his life, and he's able to fulfill more of his destiny, so to speak. and that was to protect Israel from their enemies. And he does, because he ends up probably killing a lot of leadership and causes those 5 cities to kind of be in disarray, so they weren't so oppressive to the Israelites. Because there's another 100 years yet before you have Saul coming as king in Israel, before they have a leader, and then David follows him. Any other thoughts?
We got a couple more judges before we get to God's call to David.
Sorry?
We got a lot of judges to go through still to get to the call of David.
Well, there's 100 years. Samson's really the last judge. Yeah. So there's 100 years of just nothing. But I think, well, I say nothing. That's not entirely. I'm just speaking out of my ignorance here because I don't know what happens between those 100 years. Yeah, the Bible continues, and it has Micah's idolatry, which will be taken up next week. And then you have the Danites, and you have some other drama that goes on for this next 100 years. But there doesn't appear to be a judge, and I use that word loosely because he never really sat on a throne, right? He was just a guy that was a walking around threat that kind of was a buffer between God's people and their enemies. That's what a lot of the judges were. There wasn't really an established government. They were just guys that kind of put themselves, God that put them in places to protect his people.
Yeah, we go with the definitive first Kings after Ruth.
The big thing was everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And God sent these special people to do these special missions to kind of keep his people on track before. Because he still has to fulfill the promise, right? The promise all the way back in Genesis, he has to deliver this Christ that would come approximately 1,100 years after Samson's life. Yes?
Where does it talk about the 5 cities that you're mentioning about?
Yep. The question is, where does it talk about the 5 cities that were mentioned about? What verses? It's a very good question, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to, on the spot, tell you book, chapter, verse for that, so I do apologize. I'm just looking through my notes. Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath, and Gaza. Those are the 5.
You know where that's found in Judges?
Listed like that? No, I don't know where it's listed in Judges.
Does it say 5 cities anyway?
Yes, yeah, there are 5 cities. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Yep. It's a very good question.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
This is telling me that whether you're with God or you're without him, his will will be done.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
And if when Samson was with God, God protected him. But the minute Samson always thought God was going to be with him and he could do whatever he wanted, but when God left him, he got punished. He had to come around, but eventually, whether he was with him or not, God's will was done.
Mm-hmm. No, you're exactly right. So her point is, no matter what you choose to do, God's will is going to happen. Okay. So then the question is, do you want to be a part of that story and be on the good part of that story, or you want to be on the bad part of that story? It's kind of like the book of Revelation, right? I mean, we can fast forward to the end, and I can tell you what happens at the end. But what part of your life are you going to be on the right side of the story or the left side of the story? And that's your choice. And you see it with Samson too, right? He took God's grace and the blessings that God gave him for granted most of the time. In the very end of his life, he kind of comes, he has a moment of clarity, and he says, okay, yeah, I'm going to submit to your will. I'll use my blessings for your sake. Just kind of have mercy on my soul. And I think whenever we come to those moments in life, most of us are old enough in this room to have a couple bumps and bruises, you say, okay, I'm sick of doing it my way. It doesn't really work out that well when I do it my way. We'll do it your way, and just be with me and help.
If we don't do it God's way, we won't be in heaven. So that right there should help us. I know it helps me.
Yeah, for the smart ones like you. For the hard-headed ones like Samson, right? He was only living in the moment for his pleasures, right? He liked women a lot, and he didn't have a drinking problem. So I guess that's like a half-hearted joke we could say, because he was a Nazarene, right? Or took the Nazarite vow, so he didn't do a lot of drinking, and not a lot of. He didn't waste his money on haircuts, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had other problems. Yeah. And
He wish he never met Delilah. But then again, he killed more, the Lord killed more Philistines when he held up the temple than before. It says he killed more
Yep.
Philistines than before he got put into, the prison and got put away. Yeah.
That's a recurring theme through the scriptures too, isn't it? The blessings are always bigger at the end than they are at the beginning. Just a few things that come to my mind. You have Job, right? And he was blessed with double of what he had. You have the promise of Christ, and Paul saying, "No man has seen, nor eye has seen, the riches that will await those in glory." Name some other places in Scripture.
Bathsheba, because, he still, even after, he killed her husband, he still was blessed, wasn't he? He, in a way, anyway.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. So with David's sin, the temptation with Bathsheba, the child died later on, right? But he repented, and yeah, he had his own problems, but yeah, he still grew in power and wealth as he followed God. Yeah.
It doesn't say that he was after a man after God's own heart. So
Yeah. That's no doubt. The scripture does say that David was a man after God's own heart, with many flaws, so to speak. Samson too, he may get a bad rap, but he was just a flawed guy, just like the rest of us gals and girls are in this room, right?
Yeah, look at Saul before he became Paul. He was executing us. He was executing us before Jesus said, "Oh, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And
Yeah.
then the light bulb moment happened. Then he was blinded, and then he was then one of the disciples of our apostles went to him and healed him.
I think that's a general human condition. We just don't know the future. We just don't know the future, and you never will. It's just a limit placed on us by God that, yeah, we're going to be made in God's image. We're going to be creative like Him. We're going to have an intelligence, a fraction of His. We're going to have some attributes of God, but you're not going to know the future. But God says, I'll tell you the future, if you can handle it, if you walk by faith and you follow me and you do things the way I ask you to do them, things will turn out well. But if you don't, there will be consequences. And that's hard for humans to see through the moments in life to get through to the other side, to have that faith that better things are beyond if you just follow God's prescription, God's way of living. Yeah. We're going to end class now, unless there's any other questions or comments. Okay, so don't be so hard on Samson. He was just a guy trying to get through. He learned a couple of hard lessons, but just like the rest of us. So, all right, be safe. Thank you.